Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Cassandra Rosica, and I am the IVMF Alumni Services Coordinator. Welcome to today's VetNet hosted by the Daniello Institute for Veterans and Military Families. This VetNet will be focused on the Veterans Program for Politics and Civic Engagement. And it'll cover some key insights about the program. So allow me to introduce our hosts, Nick Armstrong, who is the Research and Data Managing Director for the Daniello Institute for Veterans and Military Families, as well as Steve Lux, who is the Executive Education Programs Director for Syracuse University. So thank you all for joining. Then I'll pass it over to Nick and Steve.
Great, thanks, Cassandra. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. First off, just want to apologize for being off camera. I'm actually calling in from our nation's capital. We've got some Hill engagements today, so excited to be calling in from sunny DC as opposed to Syracuse, where we just got about a foot of snow within a day ago. So, but really excited to share a little bit with you about this program we've been running. Really, actually, in supporting the running of the program with our great partners at the Maxwell School of Citizenship and Public Affairs, Steve Lux and his team in executive education. And so we've been running this program now for about 4 years, and just excited about the interest that that has been picking up on it, and share a little bit more about that with you. If you want to, Steve, you want to advance to the next slide? I think I'm just going to say a little bit about the Institute and Syracuse University overall, and then hand it off to Steve to talk a bit about history of the Maxwell School and then the program itself, and we can dive into questions and answers. But again, fast forward, Steve, about me, Army veteran, served 7 years on active duty, came to Syracuse for a master's degree, thought I'd be at Syracuse for a year, and 15 years later have had the fortune of being a part of helping grow the Institute. And the Institute itself is not typical. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but when I came to Syracuse, I didn't really actually appreciate the history that the university has in its connection to the military community. If you want to jump ahead, Steve. A lot of folks ask, why Syracuse and veterans, and actually when I showed up, didn't realize that our history goes back to World War I. We actually have the longest continuously running Army ROTC program in America. This picture is actually a picture of the cadets that were part of the original Student Army Training Corps at that point in time, and we're one of the first originals that never actually shut our doors down during the Vietnam era. And that program continues strong today. You want to jump ahead, Steve? And also there are a number of programs that have been around for decades in connection, not just the ROTC, but connections like the Defense Language School, the Defense Comptroller Program, where we bring in the Army and Defense financial managers in for a dual master's degree over 14 months in public administration and in business administration. Photojournalism program in partnership with we bring all combat cameras through their Top Gun training here on campus, who go around and follow the Secretary of Defense military motion media program, and of course the National Security Studies programs, which falls under Steve's oversight in his team. And so all these military connected programs have been around for so long, that things really took off about 15 years ago with the formation of the Institute, and our current chancellor, who came in and recognizing this history and really wanting to double down and seeing this as a strategic advantage for the university of all these points of connection, and what can a major R1 research university do more for the military connected community. And I think that was really the founding motivation of standing up the Daniello Institute now about 12 years ago, with a different mission than your typical academic center, and that is to help deliver and design innovative programming that supports the military community through transition and well into their post-service. And so, Steve, you want to fast forward one more slide? Today, the Institute, even though we are based in Syracuse University, we have a staff a little over 100 personnel operating programs all over the country. You can see here from this map, we actually have a third of our workforce delivering this programming in 13 states across the country, and to date have put close to 200,000 transitioning service members, veterans, and their family members through different programs, whether it's career training, entrepreneurship, small business, and navigation of support in communities. We also do research, and that's a team that I head up at the Institute, very much focused around these issues. But with that, that's just a quick overview of the Institute. And of course, this program is just yet another example of taking what is best on a university campus, like what we find at the Maxwell School, and delivering a program that is truly unique and serves an uptick in demand in veterans and their family members wanting to start their second service in life through politics and in public service. And so with that, I'll pass the baton over to Steve, and he can dive into the Maxwell School. Thanks.
Thanks, Nick. Super pleased to be here. I often say to Nick and anyone at IVMF, if they want to hire me full-time just to do this program, I'm all in. Have an incredible group of alumni that we get to lean on, and just a lot of great people to meet along the way. In case you haven't noticed, there's a lot of discussion about polarization and all this kind of, the bad feelings we have about politics these days. So number one, I want to thank you for considering jumping into the game. And I also hope you understand how much we all need you to jump into the game. So this is meant to help you jump in the game if we can do it. I'm going to start by bragging about the Maxwell School and Syracuse University a little bit. But I also want to get out of the way because the most important in the room is Jennifer Cowish, who is an alum of the program, an elected official in the program, and perhaps running for even higher office. So Jennifer, thank you for being here. We really, really appreciate your time. And so I'm going to be quick. So you may or may not know Syracuse University so well. You may or may not know the Maxwell School so well. But what I like to brag about the Maxwell School is it has a very clear mission, and that's essentially to make the world a better place. And you have already served in capacities of varied places, varied responsibilities, and all of us who are not veterans should certainly thank you for your service. And then I'm asking you to do even more, right? We're asking Jennifer to do even more. You've put all this time as a military connected spouse and had a military career. There are all different types of sorts that are in the program, and we're asking you to do more. The Maxwell School is a school of social sciences, first and foremost, meaning economics, anthropology, history, political science. We're often ranked number one in the country as the leading school of public affairs, and so that's something we certainly brag about. There's a website you can link off of this slide deck. We're perhaps most well known for what we do in the field of public administration. In other words, getting people prepared to excel in the public sector. We come at this from a very simplistic, perhaps complicated is a better way to put it actually, but this notion that you're a citizen first and an elected leader second, or a public official second, or a military officer second. In other words, we all have a civic responsibility as citizens of this country, and the whole ethic of the place is to try to get people ready for that, either as someone's elected official or not, voting, et cetera, participating, being civically engaged. We are necessarily interdisciplinary, and what we mean by that is we think the world's complex. The world is very complex. And most of the problems would be solved already if they weren't quite wicked to begin with. And in order to solve things like poverty, racial issues, on, we need to understand that there's history to these issues, there's sociology around these issues, there's politics around these issues, economics around these issues. So the world's a complex place. And in fact, when we think about this program, we also believe that you will benefit from an interdisciplinary faculty, if you like. So of course you'll meet political scientists that can talk to you about how to run a good campaign, but at the same time, you should meet people that know something about information systems and social media. And of course, you should meet some people that know something about policy, so on and so forth. So that's just a little bit about the Maxwell School. What I hope we can clarify today before you get off this call is at least answers to about 6 questions or 6 areas. You know, what are we trying to achieve? What are the subjects that are embedded in the program? Who are some of the speakers? How is the program structured? What our expectations are, and how to apply. And maybe I'll start with how to apply. But after this call, because you've all given us your emails, you will get a link to a website that will clarify in some detail how to apply. So that should be relatively easy to figure out. Essentially, we'll want to know a little bit about who you are, what your interest is, why you're interested in meeting the program. Now, let me go back to the top, program objectives. There's 2 main objectives for this program. The first one is what I call informed consent or making a good decision about whether or not you should run for office. And trust me, we are okay with people going through our program and saying, you know what, that's not for me, right? It's too much of a strain on my family. It's too much of a problem. Otherwise, it's just not a good fit. So I think what I love about IVMF, the Institute for Veteran Military Families, is at the end of the day, I believe, and Nick's gonna have to correct me if I'm wrong, is that what that institute's all about is transition. Transition from life in the military and then life after the military. And our goal is for you to make good decisions about what you want to do with the rest of your life, not necessarily tell you what to do, right? So that's one program objective. If you get through the first element of this program, you say, you know what, it is for me and I want to run. The second most important objective is run a good campaign, how to run a good campaign. And the first thing Jennifer might tell you is, I hope she learned that not every campaign in every part of the country is the same. In fact, what makes this job so difficult is that you can't say there's a one-size-fits-all for every campaign in the country. And it's not just a question of what state you're in. It could be what locality you're in. It could be the nature of the politics of that particular locality. So there's a lot of nuance. All that said, we try to give you a framework for understanding what a good campaign looks like from start to finish. So those are the 2 objectives. I don't know if those objectives are clear, and please, stalk me in chat, raise your hand, whatever it might be to slow me down. I tend to speak too fast, but if those program objectives are clear, I'm ready to move on. Are they generally clear? We doing okay? Thanks, Catherine. I appreciate the head nod. And there's a hand up. Yeah, Aaron, please. Oh, you just put your thumb up. Thank you. That's not a raised hand. Yep.
Yeah, that was just me saying that. No, great speed. Thank you.
Perfect.
Sorry.
Thanks, Aaron. Appreciate it. So in terms of topical areas, they're perhaps the most important one is in and around the question of what are the elements of a campaign? Just simply put, what is the campaign? And we have a professor named is Jennifer Stromer-Galley. She's actually a professor of information studies, but she's also works with political science. So in her view, it's you as an individual. That's an important thing to figure out. The other part of the campaign is campaigns vary because the people who are running are very different, right? Every person who runs is going to take a different look at a campaign and present themselves in different ways. We talk a lot about the strategic environment. What I mean by that is, for instance, how many votes do you need to win, right? Whose ring do you need to kiss to get on the ballot in a way that matters? In some places, you don't need to kiss the ring. In New York State, I'll tell you, you got to kiss the ring. It's a funky place in New York State. It's old school, right? Maybe not in such a good way. but in other states, it's different. There are things about fundraising that are absolutely essential to many races, not all, right? And I think maybe one thing that Jennifer can help explain as well is, in her case, what does fundraising look when you want to become superior in her district? It could be different because she's thinking about running for state office, I think. Tell me if I'm wrong, Jennifer, but what does fundraising look like? We're also not shy to talk about what we jokingly call the dark arts, right? So politics is not necessarily without fights, right? I don't know what district you live in. I don't know what politics looks in your place. In upstate New York, it's a bit of a fist fight. It's not for the faint of heart. You have to get ready to fight for what you think is important. So things like oppositions research. How do you understand who your opponent is, what their weaknesses might be, how they think you are weak, right? How are they going to attack you if you're in a debate or perhaps just in social media or otherwise? So I would argue that in terms of topical areas, we want to be thoughtful about who you are, where you're running, what skill sets you have, what type of campaign team you might need, how to raise money, and how to think about the dark arts, if I'm being frank. This leads to more nuance on topics, but I'm going to probably stop there for a moment because I don't want to overwhelm you with information, and we can share this in more detail. What things do we cover? So speakers. I want to be really clear about this point. Some of our best, if not our best speakers, are veterans who have run for office already. And they've either won or lost. And everyone can learn a lot from what occurred in the loss. And those are some of the most interesting conversations, actually. What might have I done differently given a chance to run a second time? But I think what's so important about this is there are common questions that come up relative to veterans running that we need to cover. Many of you will say, well, I don't really like politics. I've been in the military. I swear an oath to the country. I don't want to pick on someone just because they're in a red state or a blue state or whatever it might be. And they'll say, how do I run as an independent? Right? So that's a topic that we like to talk about. Another topic we like to talk about from a veterans context is many of you, not all, will approach your first campaign. I want to run at the local level. That's where my interest is. So we spent a lot of time on discussing about what does it look like for local campaigns. And of course, we have a number of veterans that we call into this program to talk about what it's like to be a veteran running for local office. Things like, do you talk about your veteran status or not in the campaign? Sometimes it's very obvious you should. Some cases it's not. And trying to understand what it is and what it's not. A good idea to highlight your veteran status is something really important. Just two more quick, things about speakers. Of course, we have political scientists. Our lead faculty member is Professor Grant Rear. He's quite well known, at least in our part of the world, this part of the country, because he runs a talk show called Campbell Conversations. He's interviewed 500 or 600 political elected officials to get their take on the world affairs. He brings an incredible resource and talent to this program that we certainly appreciate. Hope you all would as well. But we also bring in other faculty. We have a faculty member named Kendall Phillips. He's a professor of rhetorical studies, and he looks at the question of public speaking, how to build a platform, how to think about campaign messaging. Because at the end of the day, no one's going to vote for you if they don't know what you're talking about or why they should vote for you, right? So those are some of the elements around speakers. So program structure. In essence, this is largely an online program where we try to meet for an hour and a half, 2 hours at a time. We try not to kill you with very long sessions. For the first program, what we call ideation, we meet for just a about 10 hours total. Some of it is delivered asynchronously, some of it is delivered synchronously. And our intent is to deliver that program sometime in August. We're still settling on the dates. But that's a program that's kind of got 12 hours. Objective is, should you run or not, right? The second program is campaign planning. That's a little bit more intense. It's more about 30 hours of instruction. It will occur roughly from the middle of September all the way through November, basically meeting weekly. And it also includes 2 days on campus, 2.5 days on campus, where we have what we call an immersion. More details to follow on the program structure, and certainly happy to entertain questions. But I'm going to stop there. I didn't get quite to where I wanted to get to, but it's already 1:21. I want to get out of Jennifer's way. So Jennifer, if you don't mind, I'm going to pick on you. If you could just say a few things about yourself, why you chose this program, perhaps what you got out of it, maybe what you didn't like. We're not afraid to take shots at each other. Frankness is the key. Learning is the key. And kind of what your plans and what you've been up to. That would be tremendous, Jennifer. Appreciate you being here.
Fantastic. It's good to see you again in the little box
Awesome.
on the screen. So yeah, my name is Jen Cowish, and currently I'm a trustee for my town. We're a township, not a city, but it's essentially a city council member. I was in the Army in the late 90s, and then I spent about a decade in a spouse role as a diplomat in Qatar and Jordan. And when we settled back into the United States, I knew that it was something I had always wanted to get into. I wasn't sure if it was something that was going to work out for me or not, or if it was just kind of a fantasy to run for office. But as soon as we got back to the US, I learned pretty quickly something we're really good at as veterans is making community fast. And that's a benefit, that's an advantage that we bring to situations. We get removed from our communities and dropped into other communities frequently. So it's a skill set that we just have that we can use in this situation. So I applied for the Planning Commission. I was not chosen. And I think that was the first time I had failed at trying to do something in the political arena. But then I tried again and I was chosen. And then we had a big fire in our area. I live in the Boulder, Colorado area. So there was a large called the Marshall Fire where we lost like 1,000 homes. And another skill set you bring as a veteran is when there's chaos and things like that are happening, we tend to jump in to help faster than most people normally would. We've seen crazy things, experienced crazy things in some of the environments that we've been in. So I think we have a bit more of a propensity to get involved when something like that's going on. And after a year of working on the fire recovery, it was election season, and I went against 8 people applying for the town board, and I got the second most votes out of the 8 folks that were running. So that was a great win experience. Again, as Stephen was saying, at the local level, it was nonpartisan. So things like being a Democrat or Republican don't come up in those situations. And we also agreed, all 8 of us, not to do any fundraising because it's a small town. It wasn't really necessary in that situation. And then due to somebody lying about their address, there was a seat that became vacant at a House district level. So for the House Assembly for Colorado. And so I had about 2 weeks to figure out how to run for House district, which was, in hindsight, I was not selected, but it was one of the most wonderful learning experiences of my life. I learned so much in that time. So even if you don't think that there's a chance that you might win, I would still recommend you try. In this program in particular, I think when I came into it, I was very insecure about whether I was the person that should be sitting in a leadership seat for my town or for my community or whatever level I was going to try to do. And I think some of the biggest takeaways for me from this program was, we know how to adapt. Again, I mentioned this already. We've had to adapt to a lot of situations that are ever changing or maybe uncomfortable. And what I found is that there's a lot of folks out in the world that just really don't have those experiences. It's a skill set that you come with as a veteran. Out of the 8 people that were running for our town board, I was the only veteran. And that surprised me because I often underestimated the power of what being a veteran means to people. There's a lot of assumptions that come with it, and most of them are good. And so it's definitely something that you want to leverage. This program essentially helped me create my campaign. I left the program with a fully finished campaign model for myself. And that was one of the most helpful things because it can seem, approaching the idea of a campaign, there's so much information out there and it can seem very overwhelming. But the way this program worked is we kind of went issue by issue, piece by piece. And by the end of the program, I had a viable campaign on my hands that I didn't feel like I had to work that hard to get. The speakers that came were amazing. I got little bits of information from each one of them that seemed to be almost, just tailored for me specifically. And I think some of the other folks that went through the course with me felt the same way. What else? There were areas of campaign, running a campaign that, because I had never done it before and I hadn't worked on someone else's campaign, I didn't even know that they existed. So it really helped to broaden my understanding of the things that you may have to think about when you do run a campaign. What else? I think when I came into the program, I was very on the fence, and some of that was my own personal stuff of not feeling, personally confident enough that I was, qualified for this, or that, I was the right person to be in that seat. And when I left the program, I did not feel that way at all. I had all the evidence that I needed, and the experiences throughout the process of the program to move forward in a much more certain way than I had before I started. So I'm so glad that you're all here and that you're all considering this. I think it will be a bit of a fire starter for you to get things moving if that's the direction that you want to go in.
Cool.
Thank you so
much. I might just put you on the spot real quick.
Yeah, go for it.
One question before we ask, Cassandra's going to jump in quick.
Yeah.
So one thing we try to promote is this nonpartisan type of environment. Essentially we want every color in the, the most metaphorical way, included in the program. We don't care if it's blue or red or purple or whatever it might be. And I wouldn't be surprised if it was imperfect, but I'm just curious if you could share some thoughts about that.
Can you rephrase the?
So if you could, did you feel like we were bipartisan enough, or yeah.
Yes, that was interesting because it was a broad mix. There were definitely some far liberal, left-leaning Democrats, and then also very right-leaning Republican folks that were all in the mix of our groups. And I remember being a little nervous in some of the situations before the meetings would happen of how it was going to go, because we shared a lot of our ideas or little tasks or projects that we would work on, and then kind of in our groups share information. And the support was amazing across the board from all sides. It didn't matter. It really wasn't a factor in the process of how we developed as a group and how we created our strategies for our own personal campaigns and learning. I actually found it really helpful because, I think as humans, we typically stay in our lane and hear the news we want to hear and hear the advice we want to hear. And so I think it's very infrequent that we put ourselves in a situation where there may be someone who be looking at things from a very different perspective. And it was a really safe and effective in terms of learning way to do that. I think that you guys did a great job. There were people across the spectrum there.
Great, thanks, Jennifer.
Thank you. Oh, thank you so much, Jennifer, for sharing your insights about the VPPCE program and your own political experience. We really do appreciate it. And then this will definitely help interested individuals, you know, kind of on the fence about joining or enrolling in the program, make that decision. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
And then we will go ahead and begin our Q&A session. I know we do have a few questions in the chat, and I see Donnie McFall. Do you happen to have a question, Donnie?
Yeah, actually I do. Steve was nice enough to post where you're serving at. And I do some business up there in Louisville, beautiful town up there. And you guys had a bunch of fires up there, I guess, right after you got elected or right around the time you were running your campaign. What was it like being under fire right away when you were trying to figure out your job? I was just curious.
You know, interestingly, I was a planning commissioner when the fire happened, and we actually, they put the fire out right in front of our house. So the homes all across the street from me are gone. And so we were out of our home for about 6 months due to the smoke damage, because it was essentially like a blowtorch blowing the fire. So everything that was in the path of the fire got smoked out. When I came home to find that one side of my street was gone and the other was still there, and my neighbors and friends who live there, I immediately started a nonprofit with another group of folks to help the residents, because we knew the ones who had lost their homes were not going to be able to advocate for themselves as well because of the trauma and the overwhelmed situation. And so I spent about 8 to 9 months just doing fire recovery stuff. And it turns out that the voters really like that, you know, so they already had an experience of me. And I think this is something I was already doing, but I didn't know it was good advice. Get involved, start anywhere, just start, do a volunteer, do a board, do a PTA, whatever it is, do something that you like and you want to participate in your community. And then your leadership skills will just show themselves. And that's how you start to engage with your community, so that when you do decide to start your campaign, you're not just a name. They know who you are, and they have evidence of your work that you've done in your community. Because I think, you know, stepping into a full campaign without any, you know, kind of testing the waters can be a little, I mean, people do it, but I feel it's a little softer entry when you've done stuff in your community. And so, you know, the fire recovery stuff has taken me from the local level to advocating at the state level. Like just this Friday, I'm hosting the governor and a congressman to talk about fire issues. And so we're starting to work on legislation through the whole state. And so my mantra is always to just go in the direction where there's a need, and that's where I'm going to be of service. And that's made it really easy to know what direction or what I should be running for, or you know, what community areas I want to spend my time. I think in the beginning of this, I was a little overwhelmed by, how do I know what's the right seat, or how do I know, you know, which thing I should be running for and why? But I think if you just start, you'll find your way. It will present itself to you.
Thank you. Thank you. And we have a couple more questions for you, Jen. So the other question is, do you have future ambitions to pursue higher levels of office currently?
I do. I don't know what that looks like yet. I mentioned that I had applied through, so I mentioned the person that had, they lost their seat because of they were not honest about their address. So a committee then was responsible for appointing someone to that seat. In that process, it looks very different than a normal campaign process. So I learned something then, though, is that I live in Boulder County. It's an extremely liberal community, and I am not a very liberal Democrat. I learned in that process that I'm a much more moderate Democrat than a lot of the voting people that in Boulder City, the proper of Boulder and then Boulder County. So I have a lot to assess about how I'm going to run in an area that predominantly is, very focused on, well, I won't get into the issues, but I wasn't a good match for the electorate, the folks that were choosing, but this is where I live. So I have to figure out what that looks like for me. I also learned that I'm not very good at kissing the ring, and sometimes you have to do that. And so I have some personal work to do on what that's going to look like for me.
Then another question for you, Jen. So this question is, what is one thing you wish you knew or wish you didn't know before starting the VPPCE program?
Is it one thing I did wish I knew or one thing I did wish I didn't know? Sorry.
One thing you wished you knew before starting the program.
That's a hard question. I think I wish I had understood more about the finance side of campaigning. It is such a huge part of this, and my naivety, I just, I thought, well, I don't like that, so I don't want to do that, so I'm just not going to do that. And you can do that at a local level in some cases, but you really can't get away from it. It's part of the process. And I think when I went through the program, I didn't take in the information as much because I just thought, I won't need this. And so there was a lot of information on fundraising and how to work on that. And so, yeah, I think if I could go back and do it again, I would have paid a lot more attention in those when those speakers talked about that and when we had lessons about that.
Perfect. Thank you. So I think there's one last question for you, and then we can move on to the programmatical questions about the program. But this next question, Jen, is that it states, now that you've pursued and obtained this level of office, do you see a direct correlation with your political service and impacts within the region of which you served?
In terms of being a veteran?
Yes.
Yeah. Easily. I think that I underestimated how much my time in the service had already prepared me for being a leader in my community. But by far, I had more experience. I had more experience of diversity and more experience of, what's the word? Just really complicated situations. I had so much more resiliency. We noticed this when the fires happened and everyone had to be evacuated. And this was a community of people who had been there for many, many years. And when we were put in hotels and we didn't know when we were going to be able to go back to our home or what it was going to look like, what veteran has not been in that situation, right? Like, so there were people around me just losing their minds because of the unknown or the kind of treading water while they figured out what was next. And it was one of those things where I felt like the military had specifically equipped me for dealing with this. And so our family handled it a lot better than many of the other families did in the situation. I mean, that's just one example of your experience with the service has given you these innate qualities that you have that other people just don't have. And sometimes it's not going to be really obvious. And when you start to work within the community, you may find that you're faster to stand up than other folks, or you're more quick to move towards danger than other people. And this is what they need, somebody willing to do those kinds of things. And I think that the overlay is it's just a really obvious overlay now on the other side of it. I think I was afraid because I was a veteran or new to the community that I wasn't going to be accepted or I wouldn't be valued as a good leadership from the community because I hadn't been there for 20 years. But on the contrary, I bring something that others just don't have in terms of managing problems, assessing situations, and having creative solutions because of the life that we've lived.
Perfect, perfect. Thank you so much, Jen, for your time and providing these valuable insights. We really do appreciate it. So Steve, we do have a couple of questions for you regarding the programmatical elements of the program. So the first question is, I'm currently enrolled in a university using my Chapter 33. Can this program be paid out of pocket? If so, what is the cost?
Yeah. So the good news here is, at least for this year, the program does not have a tuition fee. So it's essentially the cost of instruction is free. What we do ask people to do if they're enrolled in the campaign planning portion of this program is that they would pay for their travel to Syracuse. You know, after they arrive in Syracuse, hotel and food is taken care of, but so there's that one expense. So otherwise it's free for the moment. We have to kind of assess that down the road, but at least for this cohort, the cost is not so prohibitive. I don't know, does that answer your question?
Yes.
Or that was yeah, okay, yeah.
Perfect, thank you. The next question I have is, could you provide an example of how alumni of this program have been able to succeed and grow within a career in politics?
So I guess what I'm going to try to do is amplify some of what Jen said, and then of course, hopefully Jen jumps in if I don't get this quite right. I think what Jen said, at least one thing I heard is, this is a long-term thing. You know, there's not, it perhaps doesn't move as quickly as a career in the military. I don't know. You know, you kind of live off one experience and you build upon it. So this is our 4th year running the program. We have roughly about 200 alumni in the group. And I think what's interesting, and really, you know, I'm not going to add another objective, but really, ultimately, the strength of this program will be the network as much as the learning, right? You know, the fact that you might be able to call Jen or call whomever and say, what did you really experience? But I think where we're most successful is helping people who are trying to make the decision to run into politics or thinking about running for a local office, because you might say the roadmap is very clear. I think where it gets more difficult is exactly what Jen described. She gets elected at a local level, and then you say, oh, what about state office? What about national office? What about this, that, and the other? And I think what you'll see for people like Jen, but also someone like Pam Hunter, who's a New York State legislature, things start flowing to you once you've been elected, right? Once you've been proven you can win an election, suddenly you're I don't know, commodity is not the right word, but you're someone to think about and take seriously. And then where do you want to go next? So how you grow within a career in politics is very personal, right? You have to come up with that growth plan, if you like. But it varies dramatically, and part of it is just to talk to others about how it's happened. So I didn't answer that question so specifically, but I hope you get the gist of it.
I would just
ahead.
add, like, running for the state seat for me, people came to me and asked me to do that. That was not, it wasn't on my to-do list in the next year. It was really, people came to me and asked. And then when I did it, now people are like, okay, so when the cycle comes around again and there is a campaign season, you're going to run, right? So it's not, it's sometimes you don't have to plan that far out. You just have to start. Yeah.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you. So we do have maybe 1 or 2 more questions. The next question is, and maybe either of you would be able to answer this. So do applicants need to obtain previous experience in a politics-driven career to apply, or former experience in politics? Oh, I think you're
We
muted.
take one, no. The answer is very clearly no. Yeah. I mean, sometimes it's helpful, but to have some of those experiences. But I also will amplify what Jen said, because we hear a lot from other veterans is it's more about the civic engagement than it is particularly or exclusively about political experience, right? Because both can contribute to your sense of public duty or public engagement, so, but no to start. And then if you were going to say, well, what type of experience would be relevant, it can be almost any type of volunteer work, civic engagement, VFW, whatever it might be, it's all good.
Perfect. Thank you, Steve. And I believe Fred has his hand up. Do you happen to have a question, Fred?
Yes, I do. I was wondering, this program does it give you the theory behind running politics, or once you finish the program, if there's something you really want to do you have a roadmap to begin as well?
Do you want to take a whack at that, Jen?
Sure. I think that you will get out of it whatever you want from it. So if you want a roadmap at the end, you can make that as you go along. And that's what I wanted. I wanted to have something that said, this is what I do, and this is what I do next, and now I do this, and now I do that. And the information that's provided over the series of the course isn't always in a straight line like that, but you can apply it to what you're working on and how you're going to use it, and really start to vet, what seat are you interested in, and which one do you want to move towards. You probably already know. I feel like most of you probably already have some idea of some direction that you would want to go in. And so you can build that. You can take all the information and then put it together later. What I found was helpful was imagining I'm getting firsthand knowledge on how to run a campaign. And by the end, I even had logos, like I was ready to go. So I think it can be whatever you want to make it.
Awesome.
Okay, thank you.
So one last question, and it can be for either you, Steve, or you, Jen. What key insights will participants take from this program to implement in their own professional development?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. So I'm going to make an argument that there's a lot of stuff you can apply to almost anything, but like I personally love the public speaking, getting to know who you are as a candidate and what you think you can offer to the world. Jen is also amplifying that, you got to do some work on yourself, right? Like, what is it that you want to contribute to this country in addition to what you've already done? And again, we should be all thankful for what you've already done, right? You've already done a lot, right? So maybe that's enough. But if you want to do more, the question is, what might that be? And then, these rhetorical studies professors will remind you that these 3 fingers are great, because if you go like, I want to do 10 things, you're in trouble. But if you say, I'm interested in 3 things, our brains can remember 3 things. And so there's a lot of packaging about how you present yourself to the world, I think is really important. It could be true, like in an academic environment, perhaps in a military environment. We have high tolerance for lots of data and description and technical pieces. Out there in the real world, I'm sure Jen will say this is true. She came up with this really cool way to figure out what her last name is. And her campaign plan has a picture of a cow because you pronounce her name cowish. That was genius, right? And I think maybe you got some insight perhaps from Kendall, or you got some insight from someone else, but there's a lot of practical applications here, no matter what direction you take, I might argue.
I think that was a big takeaway for me. I still have contact with some of the folks that I did the course with, and we've been on socials and like cheering each other on as we've tried these endeavors and sometimes succeeded, sometimes not. But they were the basis for a safe place to practice, and not have any vote count at the end, but just a safe place to get feedback and to just try. and that is a huge benefit of this program as well.
I think the other thing, like this is kind of in the normative frame, like what we're trying to do beyond simply help you transition, but where we might contribute to the greater good. If it's true that we're overly polarized now, there's actually some good reasons why it's so. And if we're interested in reducing polarization and solving problems, there might be some ways to get after that. And a lot of it is actually being in dialogue with people you disagree with most. And how do you do it, right? Without throwing, knives at each other, or worse. So, I think that's also at least one normative thing here that we have in our mind.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve.
Yeah.
And I believe we have one last question from Demetrius.
Yes, good afternoon. How's everyone doing?
Good, thank you.
Excuse my camera traveling right now. So I'll get my question out of the way. So I ran a race here I stay in Georgia. I ran a race here, first time candidate. And I came up like 380 votes short of winning my seat. But my question is, as you start to navigate your political career and you don't win these races, how do you ensure that you don't look like someone who's running for local seats, running for municipal seats, just running for the sake of running because you're looking to hold these seats?
I love your question, Demetrius. I'm going to admit that I don't have a good answer for it because it's not quite my area of expertise. I have an opinion, but I don't have expertise in it. Yeah. But put it this way, if you're in the program, that is something we talk about all day long. Yeah, Jen.
Well, I can share a specific example. So for the House seat that I ran for that I was not selected for, in the process of campaigning, there were clear goals that I wanted to achieve, specific bills that I would have introduced had I been selected. And when I wasn't selected, I immediately started working with the person who was selected to move those bills along. So what I brought never went away. I never stopped working on it. I was going to work on it whether I was in the seat or not in the seat. And I think that is all the public will ever need to see, to know that you're committed to the outcomes and that you're not just seeking a seat, but you're committed to the progress and what actions are actually taken. And so I had no ego in it. I just said, okay, you're in the seat now. How can I help you succeed and get the stuff that we want done for our community done? And it's been a huge benefit because I'm actually getting the things I wanted to do done and I'm not doing them. So there's a positive side to that, but it shows me I'm still involved. I'm still advocating for those issues. And when it comes time for another campaign cycle, I am not going to have just disappeared off the radar because I didn't win. And that's an internal drive that I have towards the issues. And so I think if you just stay true to that and you keep working on things from whatever capacity you're in, it shows, it will show up.
Thank you for that, Jennifer. And I also like to say, I wish I had this program before I ran.
I feel very fortunate to have had it before I ran. Yes.
But we love you running, Demetrius, and it's, being in the game is half the battle. So congrats on the run.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for, sharing those valuable insights with us. And I just want to ask either Steve or Jen, if you have any final, maybe like insights or anything else you'd like to share about the program or any sort of insights you have for everyone.
Do you want to take a whack, Jen? Yeah.
This is just personally to anyone who's on the call. If you're considering it and you're here, just say yes and do it. Because if you're interested, and this is something that you have probably had in your mind, in your heart to lean into, it doesn't happen until you start. So start. That's my advice. You don't have to be ready. You don't have to have a plan. You just need to start.
Right. And maybe that gets at one of the questions here, which is, what part of serving politics are veterans least prepared or need to grow for success in the profession? I think you're over prepared. I think you're ready. You got what you need, and you're just like everybody else. You need a little bit of additional knowledge and practical experience sharing, and maybe that dovetails with what Jen just said, to get in, go. And we'll be here to support, and people like Jen, and there's, there's this 200 people that have been through the program, and not every alum is as active as others, clearly with any program, but there are a lot of people that will pick up the phone when we ask, oh, Tyler Gray, I don't know where Tyler Gray is from, but maybe he's from upstate New York, and here's a politician who's serving on the town board in upstate New York. Would love to talk to Tyler Gray, all good.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you all for tuning in today. We really do appreciate it. We will be sharing the recording, all links shared by Steve, contact information after this meeting, and any questions you all have, of course, you can relay that to us, Steve or Nick. Thank you all so much for joining. I do appreciate it. Everything will be shared. So have a great day. And again, thank you for tuning in.
Thank you so much.